Hello, everyone. Jeff Murrin here, and I want to speak with you today about Book 4 of the Iliad, specifically the Robert Fagel's translation of the book. We are going to be looking at, as I said, Book 4, which is titled The Truce Erupts in War. Now, if you remember, when we were last looking at this in Book 3, we saw that the Trojan army and the Greek army, both of them, laid down their weapons. They sat down on the earth, and they were going to allow Menelaus and Paris battle out amongst themselves to see who was going to be the victor, and whoever was the victor was going to be the person who got to keep Helen for himself. All right? This, though, we get a sense of what's going to happen here because the chapter tells us this is the truce that erupts in war. So, I want to point out at the very beginning, we see the gods. We see, namely, Zeus, the Mac Daddy there, and we also see his wife Hera and Athena. And Zeus is sort of looking down at them and sort of mocking them. All right, and so I want to read you a little bit of what he says here at the beginning. This is at the very end of line 6 and carries on to 7 and beyond there. But it says, "So, those two goddesses there are Menelaus's best defense, Hera of Argos, Boeotian Athena, guard of armies. Look at them, sitting apart, watching the dueling, so they take their pleasure. But Aphrodite here, with her everlasting slaughter, always stands by Paris and drives the deadly spirit from her man. Why, just now she plucked him away. She saved his life when he thought his end had come. Nevertheless, clearly victory goes to Menelaus, dear to Ares. So now we plan how the war will all work out." I find that to be very interesting. We see, let's put it this way. We saw at the very beginning that battles in the Greek army between Agamemnon and Achilles and how they weren't getting along and how, that was sort of weakening the ranks of the Greek army before the Trojans ever even came up. And now we can see that there are the similar types of things going on within the ranks of the gods as well. All right, so it's not that the humans are all that different from the gods. They have their own pride. They have their own favorites, and we'll see that and talk about that here in just a second. So really, we see the humans are kind of the pawns working out the battle strategies that the gods themselves are dealing with each other. Okay, and Hera doesn't like the way that Zeus is talking about her and about the Greeks, and so they get into it back and forth. Hera is Zeus's wife, and so this is sort of a domestic dispute between these gods and goddesses here. So let's take a look at page 147, beginning about line, let's say 51, 2, 3, about 54. Okay, Zeus says, "I honor sacred Ilium most." All right, when you see Ilium, that is a synonym for Troy. That would be the Latin word for Troy. So he says, "I honor sacred Ilium most with my immortal heart. Priam and men of Priam, who hurls the strong ash spear. Never once did my altar lack its share of victims, wine cups tipped, and the deep smoky savor. These are gifts we claim. They are our rights." All right. And then it goes on to say, "And Hera, the queen, her eyes wide answered, 'Excellent. The three cities that I love best of all are Argos and Sparta, Mycenae, with streets as broad as Troy's. Raise them whenever they stir the hatred in your heart. My cities. I will never rise in their defense, not against you." Okay, so we see that Hera says, "All right, look, you're Zeus, and I'm never going to rise against you. So do what you do. And so we can see that there's this negotiation type of a thing going on between the gods, and the fates of the people are in their hands. Hang on. Hera goes on. I'd never grudge your pleasure. What if I did protest? Forbid you to raise their walls. What good would protest do? You are far stronger than I. Still, you must not make my labor come to nothing. I am a god too. My descent the same as yours. Crooked-minded Cronus fathered me as well, the first of all his daughters, first both ways, both my birth, and since I am called your consort, and you in turn rule all the immortal gods. So, come, let us yield to each other now on this one point, I to you and you to me, and the other deathless powers will fall in line. But quickly, order Athena down to battle now, into the killing ground of Trojans and Achaeans, and see that the Trojans break the sworn truce first and trample on the Argives in their triumph. Now that seems kind of weird to me, that Hera, who loves the Greeks, says to Zeus, her husband, who favors the Trojans here at this point, to say, hey, go ahead and let them break the truce, and let's let the Trojans just take over and destroy things. But what better way to have the Trojan army feel, not the Trojan army, I'm sorry, I misspoke. The Greek army. What better way to have the Greek army feel justified in what they do than to have the Trojans break the truce? If we have a truce and you break the truce, then I'm justified in handling you however I want to. You broke the truce. It's your fault, whatever comes. All right. So I think that may be a tactic that we're looking at here, with Hera still favoring the Greeks, but putting it out there to seem as though she's allowing Zeus to have his favored group win. All right. So what happens then is Athena goes down, and Athena talks to someone named Pandarus. And Pandarus then, what she does with Pandarus is she convinces him, hey, let your spear fly. Have at Menelaus. If you can get rid of Menelaus, all this is over. All right? If Menelaus goes down, then Paris keeps Helen, and then they go home. You all stay here. It's over, and you guys are the victors, and that's it. So Pandarus lets one fly, lets the spear go, and hits Menelaus, but it's only a glancing blow. All right? So it's not enough to fulfill the agreement, because Menelaus doesn't fall, but it is enough to make it all hell break loose. All right, and all hell does break loose, and you can see over and over and over a phrase that is, and the dark came swirling down across his eyes. You can see that as one soldier falls and another soldier falls and another soldier falls. You see that phrase because that's, the blood just streaking down the person's face. Okay, so when I say all hell breaks loose, and people are just knocking others down one by one. Okay, so one thing I also want to point out, and this is on page 160. I think this is very significant. Remember when, before we started, I gave that little story about the golden apple of discord? If you haven't seen that yet, you might want to pause it, dig that video up, and bring that video back so you know what's going on. But in that, the goddess who is known as Eris, who is also known as Strife, started this whole thing to begin with Paris and Menelaus and all that kind of stuff, and Helen, and she's kind of to blame for bringing up all this difficulty. But if you want to see on page 160, about line 512, it says, Ares's comrade in arms, strife. Only a slight thing when she first rears her head, but her head soon hits the sky as she strides across the earth. Now strife hurled down the leveler, hate amidst both sides, wading into the onslaught, flooding men with pain. All right, so it's interesting that Ares, the god of war, and his comrade is strife. Okay, so strife is the instigator. Strife is the one that brings us to the point. Ares, the god of war, is the one who spurs the people on to continue the fight and the enormous bloodshed that we see going on, especially in this part. All right, so Antilochus is the first Greek to kill a Trojan. All right, so it's like once this spear from Pandarus goes to Menelaus, it's all on, and now we have the first Trojan to go down by the hands of Antilochus. We see that on page 161, Odysseus is highly successful in what he's doing on the battlefield as he pushes the Trojans back. All right, so we kind of see the Trojans in a bit of a retreat here, and early the Greeks are kind of starting to step it up. And we see again on page 162, this is the last thing I want to bring up, the confirmation, it seems, of the human beings as pawns for the gods. All right, so it's about line 595 there, where it says, So he cried far on the city's heights, the awesome god Apollo, but Zeus's daughter Athena spurred the Argives on. Athena, first in glory, third born of the gods, whenever she saw some slacker hanging back as she hurled through the onset. So there we see the gods intervening and spurring on people to battle, and other gods favoring other ones and spurring them on to battle. And so what we see is like the gods are up there just sort of, have these little puppet master situations where they're pushing the human beings to fight one another. All right, so that's the meat of book 4. Okay, there's still a lot, so you still do need to read. My commentary and my summaries are not nearly everything that you need to get from these books. So I want to encourage you to read it on your own. Don't just rely on me. And I also want you to stay tuned, because after this, I will be discussing book 5. So please do read both book 4 and book 5. And as always, I want to end by saying to you, happy reading. All right, thanks.